With that down, Kaylee, what is our first main topic today?
John, our first main topic comes from Shahan Narsang. Hey, John, was wondering now with runtimes of movies like Avatar, Wakanda Forever, and Babylon touching 3 hours, should cinemas now consider intermissions? Here in India, we have had intermissions since ages, and for long movies, it really helps, getting the popcorn topped up and washroom usage. Why won't the U.S. adapt intermissions, and do you think it's high time they should? John, do you remember intermissions like in the 90s? I still remember they were happening like early 2000s. Do you think we should bring them back?
I was only ever in 1 or 2 movies, I think, that had an intermission. Okay. And you guys will know that I have been an advocate of the idea of bringing intermissions back. Not for all movies, though. Not for all movies. I think there should be a time thing. Like if a movie clocks in at over 2 hours and 30 minutes, that theater should implement an intermission. And with the news coming out the other day that there are reports going around that both Babylon, the new Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie film, and the new Avatar 2 are both going to clock in at over 3 hours. It's bringing up this discussion again. And like you pointed out, there are other countries in the world that are already much further ahead than us because they already do have intermissions. I mean, it reminds me a lot about when the U.S. was like the last kid on the bus when it came to getting pre-assigned seats at movie theaters. It's like for years I would scream about that. It's like, why are we living in the dark ages? Why do I have to get in line at the movie theater for 2 hours for the movie just to hopefully get a good seat? Anyway, but we eventually caught up, and I hope we eventually catch up with countries like India when it comes to having an intermission. Now, I would propose there are several big advantages to having an intermission. So to look at those advantages, let's go over to the Campea classroom here for a second. All right. So as we're looking at intermission, I think one of the first big advantages for an intermission is, of course, a bathroom break. Now, that might sound silly, but the reality is this. When you're talking about a movie that's going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes, 3 hours long, and listen, most people will go to the concession stand, get themselves a big soda and or other types of drinks, maybe topped up on a few adult beverages before you went in. Look, a lot of people got to run use the bathroom in the span of 3 hours. The nice thing about an intermission is that, number one, it means you, as the bathroom goer, you don't need to miss any of the movie. Because that sucks. When you're sitting there, it's like, okay, I either have to choose to save my bladder from exploding, or I have to miss out some of this movie, right? That's a choice you shouldn't have to make. So if you know that at some point there's going to be a bathroom break, great. But for everybody else in the theater, you don't get to be bothered with these people getting up and down and walking in front of you to run to the bathroom because there is a scheduled bathroom break. I love that. The second advantage is phones. I hate people pulling out their phones in theaters. I hate it. Just the light coming on and causing whatever. But a lot of people are so fucking attached to their phones now. They can't go 5 minutes without checking what's the latest on Twitter. You know, how's Elon Musk screwing up the world now? Like all that kind of stuff. Love your Tesla, by the way, Elon. Anyway, so one of the great things about something like an intermission is that it gives these idiots a scheduled time that, listen, don't worry about it. You're going to get a break where you can actually go out in the foyer and check your phone to your heart's content. And I think while it won't stop everybody, I think having something like this will cut down on the amount of phone distractions in a theater. I think it's a really good idea. Also, food. Listen, love it. The idea, listen, when you're sitting, you might be fine when a movie starts, but an hour and a half passes, you might be getting a little peckish. You might want a little snack. Well, you got a choice. I can either not get to satisfy my craving or I have to miss some of the movie. Well, now you've got a point where you can do both. And again, just like the advantage with bathroom breaks, you don't have people getting up and walking in front of you, wanting to go and get their stuff. You're all covered. So
They'll still do it.
What's that?
They'll still do it.
Some will still, just like the phone thing. Some will still, but I think it will reduce the overall thing. Also, just fatigue. Just fatigue. Fatigue is just like, it gives you a break from the movie for a moment. Now, what I will often hear from some people, and I find this laughable, when I get into this discussion about the idea of an intermission during a movie, you'll inevitably find, and there are lots of good reasons against it. There are a lot of good arguments against it. There are, but there's this one that always comes up that is not a good argument, which is, it pulls me out of the movie. I can't, my immersed experience with the film. Shut up. When you're at home watching something, you hit pause on your TV 15 times. You run to the kitchen, you run to the bathroom, you answer the door, you pause it for a second. It's like, so don't give me that. You're not a moron, okay? It's not like, wait a minute, the movie stopped. Oh, I can't remember where we were. Oh, now I can't enjoy the movie. No, give yourself more credit than that. You are more intelligent than that. You can handle that. So while there are legitimate reasons that work against these pros, there will be some legitimate cons. That one I reject out of hand. I completely reject that one
because these are typically edited. If it's going to have an intermission, these are cut with an intermission, so it's a story break.
Yeah, but that brings up a key important thing, that if you're going to do an intermission, you can't just say, well, the movie's 3 hours long, so at 1 hour and 30 minutes on the nose, it doesn't matter what's going on in the movie. The screen goes black and we go, let's all go to the lobby. No. Right? You've got to make sure you have a technician that looks and says, okay, here's a good spot to break. Whether maybe it's a little bit shy of the halfway mark, maybe it's a little bit over the halfway mark. You have to find a good, legitimate spot. You can't just be in the middle of the airport fight sequence in Captain America Civil War, and then all of a sudden, as Spider-Man is wrapping up Ant-Man's legs, all of a sudden the screen goes black. So you got to make sure you have somebody who actually finds a good spot to have a quick break in there. But listen, there are drawbacks to it as well, but I really think an intermission for movies like over 2.5 hours long, I think the benefits far outweigh the negatives. And this is a long ongoing thing. And now that we've got more and more movies coming out that are flirting with that 3 hour mark, I think it's a good idea. Anyway, Chris, the concept of an intermission, I don't even know if you've ever been to a movie that had an intermission, but what do you think about the idea for a longer movie? Guys, we want to thank one of the sponsors of this episode, Wondery, and their official Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power podcast. Your host, Felicia Day, and several special guests provide an inside look at the groundbreaking series and what it took to bring Middle-earth to life. Each of the episodes of the official podcast features exclusive interviews with the series showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, including the very first full breakdown of the incredible season finale. Felicia also goes behind the scenes with the cast and crew to bring you jaw-dropping stories and Easter eggs you won't want to miss. So watch The Rings of Power on Prime Video and listen to all 8 episodes of the official The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power podcast for free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app now.
And we would have like intermissions at drive-ins.
That's
I'd go to those in
between
Tomball, but
movies.
yeah, it was between the two films, and that made sense to me. I think this makes sense in a financial way for movie theaters because we all know concessions is where they all actually make their money, not in ticket sales. So I think this is a really great way to inject more money into the theater itself. I don't know if I like the actual idea of this though, because I am one of those people who's like, but I'm in the middle of this. I don't want to leave. I don't care that you have to go pee. Go pee. Like, you figure it out, Aaron. Okay. Like, I just think it could really mess up the flow of the film personally.
It also sounds like you're talking about intimacy, but never mind. Please continue.
Wow.
Sorry,
I'm so concerned about what you all do now. There's urine playing involved? Ew.
No.
I'm not going to kink shame. That's fine. Do you. I just think that it could mess up the flow of the film. And it would have to be handled very deftly. And the intermissions then also would have to be done per movie, obviously, to have that nice cutting point. It could work, but
What do you think could be some of the other drawbacks? Because there is the one issue about, does it pull you out of the movie for it to pause? But there are probably a couple of other drawbacks. Do you think of some other? I mean,
second acting, just like you do in the theater, right? You'd have to check your tickets again for people to come back in.
Well, but at that point, you're already, because most movie theaters, you got to show your tickets to get in the door and then to be in the whole lobby area. As long as you're not leaving the lobby, I think you're good. But I mean, one of the big other drawbacks to me that I can think of is, hey, listen, you're already dealing with a 3-hour movie. You're going to add 7 more minutes on top of that.
Plus 30 minutes of trailers.
Yeah, well, don't even get me started on the 30 minutes of trailers.
Well, don't forget our
if you can
ad.
do 30 fucking minutes of trailers, you can give us a 7-minute break. Anyway, but it does. You're already talking about a really long time at the theater. Now you're adding even more time. So I could see that as another legit drawback as well. Anyway, Rob, you and I have talked about the idea of an intermission for years now, and we tend to go back and forth a bit. What do you like about the idea? What do you not like about the idea?
I mean, I grew up, seeing classic movies. A lot of them had intermissions. And what was great is the filmmakers put the intermissions in. And then they had interact. So
you even had it when you brought it like on home video. That was still in that edit.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, oh yeah. They keep the intermission
Right.
in the edits of the films. They still do that. And there's actually a piece of score that's written for the intermission. So like a composer actually writes a specific
That's right,
piece
yeah.
for that interact. And
Quentin Tarantino just did that recently with the Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight,
Yep.
exactly. And I like that. I mean, and what's interesting too is the filmmakers, they would actually do something that was fairly dramatic. Like it wasn't necessarily a cliffhanger, but they would leave you on a note where you're contemplative of what's going to happen next, what you've just seen and where it's going to go. And so that choice was also a filmmaker's choice. And it actually, even though there is an intermission, it added an element of something, which I liked. And, for something like Way of Water, if it's over 3 hours, I see that as a benefit, if anything. I mean, James Cameron's going to give you a moment. I think, look, 3-hour movies are great. I love them. The Right Stuff, one of my favorite movies of all time, is 3 hours and 15 minutes. There's no intermission in that movie. It moves by like a gunshot, but it could use an intermission. It takes place over a period of time. There's great places where you could put an intermission. And I think it just makes movies more manageable. And I'll tell you, I've enjoyed, when I was growing up going to the Seattle Film Festival, they'd show like epic 70 millimeter, like 10 Commandments.
Right.
You'd see an intermission in the middle of the 10 Commandments. And it's good. I think it was actually better because the film was structured to have an intermission. And if the filmmakers are thinking about it, I think it's best. I mean, I don't know how it works in India, but a lot of those Bollywood movies, because the dance numbers run long,
Yeah.
they're like 3 and 4 hours long. So I would imagine, I've actually never seen, I've never been to India. So I've never seen a movie in India. So I would imagine, I've heard that they all have intermissions. They're probably built into the films. They're not just, I don't want a theater to like randomly turn off a movie and go, it's intermission time.
Yeah,
I really
next.
think that they need to be put in by the studio and the filmmakers.
There's one thing you did not put on the Campea Classroom. You missed a great opportunity. I mean, this is a perfect spot to play this. Wait, I don't have it.
Wow.
Oh.
The black
There it
screen.
Yeah, that's what they do. They
man.
turn the
You
movie
do
off,
this.
Jonathan. Good job.
Jonathan was so excited about his setup for this. Oh, there you go. Exactly. You want to play this fucking waste of time in the
put
theater?
it on the
Play it
intermission.
during the intermission. Play it during the intermission.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the guys who goes to the movie theater most in here is Taylor. I would be curious, Taylor, for the amount that you go to the theaters. What would you like? Look, it's only about one or two movies out of every 10 that'll go over 2.5 hours. But
Right.
what would you think about an intermission in longer movies like that?
No, I wouldn't like it, honestly. I feel like it would give people an excuse to be on their phone again. Like they'll text someone, like they'll go on Tinder, right, during the intermission.
Because that's what you do in the
And then,
movies.
or
Yes.
if you're Rob, you'll order some butter to be delivered to your seat.
Ross gotta get
That's only if I'm watching Last Tango in Paris. Come on.
But I just feel like it'd give them another reason to continue the conversation into the movie. I would rather just get through the movie. Hand out some Depends if it's the bathroom that's an issue.
but maybe part of that is something that actually bothers me more than I think most people, is that I really hate it when I'm in a movie and people are getting up, and I don't blame them. They got to go to the bathroom. They got to take an emergency call. I'd rather them leave the theater and do it. I don't blame the people, but I really hate when I'm sitting there watching a movie and excuse me, or you're in one of these theaters that the seats are so narrow that you can't just lean back. You actually got to stand up and like that bothers me so much. Maybe if it didn't bother me as much, maybe the idea of an intermission wouldn't appeal.
It's totally disruptive.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're sitting in there, and it's not just somebody gets up, it's your entire peripheral vision while they walk down and move out of the theater. I mean, I know people got to go, but it's like it is disruptive. It really is. And I think what's great.
Again, I don't blame them at all. I don't blame the individuals. If you got to go, you got to go. I don't blame them.
And I'll tell you something. I don't know. I don't even know if this movie has this, if it has an intermission, but Ice Station Zebra has this incredible score. It was Howard Hughes' favorite movie. And I seem to remember there's just this great piece of music at the at the intermission. It might not have an intermission, but I remember it as having an intermission. And, when that piece of music, that da-na-na-na, I'm like, wow, it makes you realize what you just saw was awesome.
Howard Hughes wouldn't have used that intermission, though. He would have peed in a jar and kept watching.
Oh, no. And Betsy clipped his nails.
Yeah.
Although I think this would be much like the pre-assigned seating thing. Because I remember back in my movie blog days, I would do editorials like every 2 weeks about what the F are we doing, get pre-assigned seating. And there would be so many people on my blog who would write and say, no, pre-signed seating doesn't work because
Those that arc light.
this one, it'd be like, what if you get to your pre-signed seat and there's a piece of gum in it? Well, then move to another seat. The same thing would happen. Well, what if all the other seats are full? Well, if you go to a non-pre-assigned movie theater and all the other seats are full and you got a seat with a piece of gum, it's not any different. I mean, but now that we have pre-assigned seating, everybody's like, I can't imagine going back to non-pre-assigned seating. I think if we had intermissions for super long movies and only super long movies, I think the same thing would happen. I think people would get so accustomed to that, it's like, oh my God, we could never go back. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I agree. But we did go back because there used to be intermissions.
Yeah. But then again, we don't have, like, the movie runtimes today aren't like they were back in that day too, right? But anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? There are pros and cons, but I kind of think that if we re-implemented intermissions for movies like over 2.5 hours long, I don't think anybody would want to go back. But maybe there's some other tangible benefits to it. Maybe there's some other tangible drawbacks to it. Whatever you guys think about it, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.